Hello, and welcome to the Final Girls podcast, where we explore the intersections of horror film and feminism. This is Anna, co-founder of the Final Girls and your podcast host. We've just wrapped our second series about female monsters, and occasionally on the podcast we'll be covering new films or series that we really want to talk about. And it is a very good weekend for horror films. So we've got a couple of bonus episodes coming up, including this one, including another one on His House, another one on Relic. Today's bonus episode is all about The Craft Legacy, which has just hit UK cinemas. It follows an eclectic foursome of aspiring teenage witches who get more than they bargain for as they lean into their newfound powers. I'm joined in this episode by writer Layla Latif, and we've both seen The Craft Legacy. That's all I'm going to say before the discussion. The first part of the episode will be our overall thoughts on the film, and then I will leave a timestamp in the show notes to mark the beginning of our spoilerific discussion of The Craft Legacy. Layla, welcome back to the podcast to talk about the film that I think we were both kind of dreading to see.
Yeah, we were determined to keep an open mind about this one. And I think I managed it until I saw the trailer. And then like a sense of dread came over me. But then I tried to be like, it's fine. Trailers are often very misleading. Gonna try and be positive. But yeah.
Yeah, I have never worked so hard at keeping an open mind as I have about The Craft Legacy. So we've been chatting about it and kind of circling around having a chat about this film. So let's get into it. And for people listening who haven't seen the Craft Legacy yet, the first chunk of this episode will be spoiler free. And then I will indicate and separate the spoilerific part of the conversation. So this first bit, we're going to be just talking about our overall thoughts of the film. So let's dig into it.
God, isn't it sad that, like you said, for people who haven't seen The Craft Legacy, and I thought, oh, that would be nice. Like how I envy those people who haven't had their childhoods ruined. No, I'm joking, obviously, but, not entirely.
I can hear your rosé wine tinkling.
Yeah, no, I was saying to Anna, I've been on a health cleanse. I haven't touched a drop of alcohol for 2 months, and this film broke me. I have a very large rosé on the go.
This is going to be a savage episode. So, before we dig into The Craft Legacy, what is your relationship with The Craft?
I was about 11 when The Craft came out. I absolutely love The Craft, as I think a whole generation of women did. It was, I was doing all of the light as a feather, stiff as a board with all my female friends. We even did the thing with like the knife to the throat. I remember like just watching the MTV Movie Awards, and when Fairuza Balk and Robin Tunney got awarded Best Fight, it was like one of the greatest feelings I've ever had, where I felt vindicated after all these men who'd been winning that fight award, because for some reason the MTV Movie Awards seemed a big deal back then, that like these two badass women managed to do it. So yeah, I love it. I actually haven't done a rewatch for a really, really long time, and I did one last night. Yeah, and I think it really, really holds up.
I completely and very obviously agree with you. What did you think? What were your expectations for this sequel reimagining that is The Craft Legacy?
Well, Blumhouse has quite a varied output. Some of the stuff that comes out of it is absolutely brilliant, like Get Out and the recent Invisible Man film I really liked. So many things. And then there's kind of a lot of duds. I think their policy generally is that they give you about $3 million and like complete creative freedom. And then, obviously sometimes that works, and sometimes you just get kind of some real, turds. But so when they first announced this, I was initially excited, and then the way they started behaving with it made me suspect that they knew they kind of had something not great on their hands, because they announced it very, very close to the release date. The trailer, didn't look good, but then also I was supposed to review this for Little White Lies, but we didn't end up doing it in the end because they just wouldn't give any screeners out to press in the UK.
Yep.
Which is not a good sign. But you weren't able to get a screener either, were you?
Nope.
No, I think it was all of us.
I went to see it at the Genesis Cinema just yesterday.
Oh, nice. Great cinema to support.
Supporting local indie cinemas as much as I can. Not going as much as I usually would to cinemas anyway these days, but if it's the only way to see this film, it's the only way to see this film. So you kind of we talked a little bit about expectations of it, but without going into the details that we'll discuss later on in the episode, and with all of this, I'm going to call it tension of seeing a reimagining of a beloved film from your teenage years, what did you make of The Craft Legacy?
I think it sort of didn't really work on any conceivable level. I think structurally it was all over the place. I think tonally it was all over the place. I think the script was horrendous. I think the actors were actually perfectly fine. They were just kind of doing the best they could with the material. I think the plot made very little sense. I think the character development was like embarrassingly crap. But I would say still a few good moments in the mix there. It almost feels like they needed to take, I don't know, some more time with this and like let these ideas bake, fill out the dialogue so it was actually, the way human beings speak to one another. Because at times it was like, this is just not what I recognize as a human conversation.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it reminded me of something that I think I heard Paul Scheer saying about Star Wars, that that the characterization in all of the Star Wars prequels was really bad, because if you take away someone's race and gender and you describe just what they're like as a character, do you have anything there? And I think with the four main girls in this, like what character traits did they ever really have outside of their race and gender, which for a film that's trying to be super woke is very like regressive. Yeah,
I couldn't agree more.
Oh my God, I'm so glad.
Did you think I liked this?
No, but like, it's just nice to feel seen.
Yes. I don't understand what happened.
Yeah.
Because you're absolutely correct in the sense that for a film that, and I'm trying really hard to remove the weight of the expectations and the comparisons of the original Craft, which is inevitable. But I think, the conceit that the way that the film is kind of speaking to original Craft, I'm okay with. I thought it was cute. It worked for me. That's fine, because it's not trying to remake it, but it's not trying to remove itself from it. I think it speaks to the 90s Craft in quite interesting ways. But the kind of sticking on the character thing that you bring up, honestly, I'm looking at the IMDb page right now, but if you put a gun to my head right now and said, name me the name of any one of the characters, I'd be like, I seriously don't know. I can't remember a single thing about them, because...
I remember Timmy.
Yeah, and the fact that we remember the male character's name from a film that's all about 4 teenage witches is kind of not a great sign, is it?
No. I mean, I think a lot of people, from what I've seen online, hated Timmy. I think Timmy was the best thing in it. He was genuinely hilarious, that character, and really, really sweet. And then, like, when she makes out with him, I was like, oh my God, I'm 34, but I am so attracted to this 17-year-old.
I mean, yeah, no, I'm really distressed now that
Yeah,
people hate it on
but it's
TV.
such a shame. Well, I think that they just like hated the whole kind of wokeness. But I
Mm,
mean, I love a woke man.
we do love a woke man, but it kind of going back to the point you were making about the way that the characters aren't really fleshed out aside from say being, I don't know, tokenistic representatives of something, be that their gender or their identity or their race. What did you think of what they were trying to attempt and what actually got delivered in terms of the quartet of witches in the Craft Legacy?
Yeah, so we have a trans Latina witch
Mm-hmm.
who was played with a lot of style by the actress who portrays her, and
Zoe
I
Luna.
thought, yeah, they really they do talk a little bit in early bits of the film about how like, oh, witchcraft is so connected to your heritage, and I thought like, oh my god, amazing, we're gonna go into some like great bruja stuff of like the
Mm-hmm.
witchcraft from like a different tradition, and it didn't go, there wasn't one word
Hmm.
about that. And then you have this black character who at one point I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say, but like there's one point where they're kind of sharing three facts about themselves, and she says, I'm really worried for my brother's safety. I love Beyonce, and oh, and I wish I had more black friends. And I was like, are you fucking kidding me? That like we had Rachel True's portrayal in the original, which was this amazing, beautiful, stylish, three-dimensional character who experiences racism, but at the end of the day, being black is not the most fascinating thing that she finds about herself. Like she's a fully three-dimensional person who like wouldn't come up with like three post-it notes statements about yourself as like the most cliched thing a black person would say.
Mm.
And like for all that it's trying to be like politically progressive, that is regressive.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I'm really angry about that in particular because I like Rachel True for me was like such an icon, and she was treated so poorly by the
Yep.
media afterwards.
And
Yeah,
continues to be treated poorly in terms of it shouldn't even need praising, but she has been so incredibly outspoken about every
yeah,
single microaggression and erasure of her from conventions, from reunions, from press, like even from stills and things like that, like these tiny things that just sort of eliminate her character, Rochelle, who in herself was so iconic and important in to be featured in a film with the kind of the, I don't want to use the word legacy because it relates to this film, with the impact that the craft had in the 90s.
yeah, and that they're able to have this character who has like experienced such hideous racism, and some of the stuff that they that gets said to her in this film is still like really like shocking, and as a black person quite difficult to hear, but we still have this one well-rounded character that like every minute she's there, she's not sitting with her friends and being just
Mm,
like, oh, I wonder if they would be nice if more of you were black, because she's just interacting with everyone and like just going about her way in the world. That is not how people
mm,
self-reflect on about themselves, in the same way that if you're a woman, you don't walk into a room and be like, well, as a woman, that's just it. Oh, I just thought it was such lazy writing and like deeply annoying.
and we've kind of spoken about Tabby, which is Lovie Simone's character, and
Mm.
Lourdes. And then what did you think of? There is it's sort of odd to think about any protagonist in the Craft Legacy because I think it tries to very much emphasize the sisterhood element, but
Mm-hmm.
we spend quite a lot of the film with Lily. I
Yeah,
think she's kind of by default the protagonist. Did she work for you?
I think she's like a perfectly like fine actress, and she seemed charming, and I liked a lot of her fashion choices. But like fundamentally, you can't have a character who's just like says what they are and doesn't actually convey any of the things about them. Like she's very conventionally pretty and she's amiable, but she'll just kind of say like, oh, well, I've never had any friends. And it's like, well, why would, like, that doesn't add up with like everything that I can see about you. Like, you seem extremely like confident. Like, a person who has never had a friend is someone, you know, a bit like Sissy Spacek and Carrie. Like, that's what that person is like. And they would be very, you know, nervous of interacting with the world, but she doesn't have any of that. And I don't feel like it's enough for a film to just kind of have a line of dialogue to explain someone's entire motivations. Like, we do actually have to see these things be built up.
Absolutely. And like you mentioned, she seems too cool to be an outcast. Like, there's not a single, in fact, I'd say about all of them, I don't see a single thing about them that would make them outcasts in their high school, in their community. And in fact, I think their community is pretty much presented as a kind of, I don't know, Instagram perfect fall little, like, constantly autumnal little town where everyone dresses like they're on the, you know, dark academia TikTok.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And, oh, God, I actually felt really sorry for a lot of these actresses at the time, because the number of terrible montages that they have to do. And then there's a lot of times where they're all just throwing their head backs and laughing at nothing in particular.
And actually, kind of digging a little bit deeper, move into spoilers. One of the most iconic and memorable things about The Craft is this sort of teen goth aesthetic.
Yeah.
And what did you make of the way The Craft legacy looks?
I thought it was ridiculous. There's this scene where they walk in slow-mo through a cafeteria and everyone's gasping, and they literally are just wearing normal clothes and doing nothing of note. I found it like toe-curlingly embarrassing to watch. Like, I mean, there were some like good looks, but just like if you kind of put those images side by side, it's just so toothless in comparison.
The word that I kept using when in my notes was limp.
Yeah.
I just felt like it was a very, very limp, flaccid film.
God, which is like the opposite of what you would think of when you think of the original Craft. Which, the thing actually what really struck me was I got to the end of this and I thought, like, there are some scenes from the trailer that don't seem to be in this, and like I just feel like we went, like, something must have happened in the edit here.
Yes.
And I was like, oh, I reckon the original Craft, I was like, well, it was a lot longer, so we had so many more events, so much more character development, so many like points of conflict and things that happened. But then I checked, and the original Craft is 6 minutes longer. And so when you think of like the fact that we have like these 4 established characters, and they each, like, you know, have like very like different motives for doing what they're going to do, and then they each kind of accomplish things with the magic as it comes over them, and then it backfires in certain ways, and then there's conflict between them all, and there's that amazing scene with all the sharks, and there's just like there's sexual assault, and there's like weird dynamics that happen between them, and then an amazing finale. And like the fact that they did all of that in 6 minutes more is, well, both really like a credit to The Craft, but also, Jesus Christ, what the hell was this film up to?
And I'm really, really desperate for us to move into spoilers so we can discuss the finer details of this, and you can take a big swig of your rosé. But do you think this is a horror film? And I ask this because it is obviously being produced by Blumhouse, probably the most recognizable horror brand in the world right now, and is kind of being positioned in a weird in-between, between teen movie and horror movie. Do you think this is a horror film?
Wow, that's a really interesting question. I didn't like think about that until now. I guess actually it kind of isn't, which is maybe why the tone shift is so weird for me, because it's almost got like almost a Disneyfication to it, in that it's like very like clean cut and preppy, especially, you know, compared to the original Craft. I think one of the things that I liked was in the original Craft, the first time they use their magic is because they kill a homeless person, and in this one they freeze a butterfly. Um, yeah, but no, there's not. There's kind of weird like horror elements that come in every now and again. But yeah, overall, it's not got a lot of horror to it. Most of their magic is like making things pretty and sparkly, which, like, as a feminist, is also very annoying.
So on that note, let's dig in a little bit more into some of the issues and maybe some of the things that did work in the craft legacy.
Okay. All right, let's do this. I know it feels fast, but it's nice, isn't it? To have a family unit.
Come on in to meet the boys. They're really excited to meet you.
How you feeling about school? You can meet some new friends.
I know why the caged bird sings.
Wow, that is super nasty.
All right, enough. Settle down.
Hey, it happens to everyone.
He's made us all cry at one point or another.
You should come over after school.
What is all this?
This is a ceremony to celebrate you.
Why would you celebrate me?
Because you're out fourth.
Just in time for first period.
This is all just a little crazy. Half the battle of having powers is believing you do. That's why covens have always been important.
If we can do that, what else can we do?
We need to put a spell on Timmy.
We don't want to hurt him though, right?
She's right.
The number one rule of the craft. If a person is a danger to herself or others, they will be bound.
Okay, we're now in full spoilerific zone. You started talking a little bit about the way that they use magic before.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you kind of, what did you make of the way that magic is presented and used in the craft legacy?
I think the problem with it is that none of the magic that they do, well, not none of it, but like a lot of it doesn't seem to be very useful or, like actually worth doing magic for. So like a lot of it in the montages where they're kind of getting their powers and stuff, it's like somebody erases some sexist graffiti, another person changes someone's hoodie color. And I was like, well, that's pretty tame. Like whilst in the original craft there's like a real idea of like power corrupts, so they kind of start off with these noble intentions, but as they kind of get drunk on power and it all gets a lot darker.
There is no darkness at all to their powers. Like they don't seem to want anything. Like they I don't get why they want to do magic. Like I fundamentally don't understand why they're attracted to witchcraft at all, because they don't seem to have many problems. And sure, teenagers in high school is hellish.
But it also doesn't seem that hellish.
No, not really. Like, and again, I'm really trying not to compare it that much, but there is such a kind of, if they're trying to zero in on this sort of, we are the weirdos vibe, they look and dress and speak and behave by all the sort of, I don't know, markers of 2020 coolness.
Yeah. They are, it's, so in like the original, I think it's ridiculous. I mean, you don't want to compare it too much, but at the end of the day, it is positioning itself as a sequel to The Craft. But in the original, you did have this whole thing of like each one of them wanted something, and each one of them was an outcast for a reason, being that like Nancy was white trash, or like Rochelle was like receiving like horrific racist abuse, or Neve Campbell like being covered in like in terrible burns. Like they had something that was like alienating them from the student body, and that's why they were so kind of dark in themselves. But like even the fact that like one of them is trans, nobody seems to actually be like mean to them about it. And when there is one scene of a bully, the only thing she says is, I wrote it down. She says, "Oh, is your favorite type of film a period drama?" Because there's a scene in the trailer where she bleeds everywhere. Which, and if you compare to like the sort of stuff that they were saying to one another in the original film, this is just a weird choice.
I mean,
like, I would argue that could kind of be a friendly joke given what happened.
I'm gonna say something, and I'm fully aware of how mean this is gonna sound. I'm not entirely sure if I mean it to be so cutting, but I got the feeling that this film was written and made by someone who hadn't really experienced that many obstacles or trauma and had no concept of what it would feel like to be an outsider or to be othered in any way.
It's interesting you say that. So I know a little bit about the woman who made it. It's called Zoe Lister-Jones.
Yeah.
And she is probably best known to people as a comedic actress. But she made a film years ago called Band-Aid, which is all about a couple who are, their marriage is on the rocks. And so they decide to kind of start a garage band in order to therapeutically work through their problems. And you are correct in that Zoe Lister-Jones is a very conventionally beautiful woman, and she's from a very wealthy family of important artists. So there might be something there. I mean, I feel Band-Aid was a great film, so I was actually a little bit more excited about this film based on that. But she just didn't seem to get it.
There just doesn't seem to be any... What's the hardship? Like, one of the things that's most interesting about witchcraft and witches on screen is how they imbue women and kind of, you know, the disempowered and the othered with supernatural powers that allow them to, I don't know, reframe a world that is not kind of designed for them.
Yeah.
And here it's just... like what the teenagers from Beverly Hills 90210, but now they can freeze frame butterflies.
Yeah, and it is interesting that even that kind of prettification of the whole thing does also kind of extend to the men in this as well. I mean, as much as like we are supposed to believe in this film that the patriarchy is the true enemy, like, if you compare what the men in this film do to compare with like what Skeet Ulrich is like in the original, like it's a lot tamer.
Yeah.
And also, side note, if anybody really wants something lovely to follow on Instagram, follow Skeet Ulrich. He's the nicest man in the entire world. He's so positive. It's really good.
He seems like such a nice man. I was like, oh, I did not expect this from you when you specialize in playing assholes in the 90s. I love to see it.
Yeah, what a glow up. Oh, I do love Skeet Ulrich. He is one of those... But he was always like the bad boy, wasn't he?
Yeah.
But so incredibly attractive at the same time.
Truly. Also, it's him and Matthew Lillard from the 90s. So I was like, I'm so here for every weird performance that you do.
I love Matthew Lillard as well. What range that man has.
Truly. I mean, to go from Shaggy to 13 Ghosts.
And he's good in this new Good Girls, the TV series. He's the dad. Yeah.
He is very good. Going back to the Craft Legacy, they keep coming back quite explicitly, in a quite on-the-nose way, to this theme of power. There's a lot of lines that are repeated over and over again in the film, like your power is your difference, or your difference is your power. And then David Duchovny's character also kind of has this whole spiel about alchemizing weakness into sovereign power, which, to be honest, is a sentence that doesn't even really make much sense to me. No. Maybe I'm just not getting it, but it's like, those are just words. What is that supposed to mean? But what do you think? Do you think it actually succeeds, or what do you think it's trying to say about power?
I I think that there was like a decent idea there in that we have kind of Timmy who goes through because of the spell that they do, and like the way that they phrase the spell is quite interesting, and that we are not going to, they're not kind of changing his personality. They're trying. I think they rephrase it as to become his best self, and in that he becomes like this like really like sensitive, loving, non-judgmental person who it's just kind of, I suppose, like freed from toxic masculinity, whilst you have David Duchovny, who's kind of playing like a weird Jordan Peterson-esque character, where it's all like, no traditional male roles, but then in a kind of really shit monologue that he does at the end explaining his, evil plan, and he's like, oh, well, Timmy, was willing to give up his power to women, and that's why I had to kill him. But the only thing he ever did in front of David Duchovny was help get the chicken. So, like, and that's his son's best friend. So it doesn't really even kind of gel together as like a cohesive whole. And then supposedly he's also kind of a warlock, and but then also his motive was to get her powers from her. So, like, it's just a mess.
It's messy. It almost feels like there's a missed scene where his character finds out about the fact that Timmy had hooked up with his elder son.
Which would have made more sense of, like, it's like the intense homophobia of it all.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I don't know if it's been maybe slightly mangled in the edit or something, but yeah, it feels like it's a messy disconnect that doesn't quite make sense. And what do you think? I mean, we've spoken kind of a lot about the lead girls, but there is surprisingly quite a lot of male characters in this film. I mean, Timmy is the best one, but what did you think of all the men?
I didn't understand why there were three sons that looked so similar to one another.
I'm not gonna lie, I really couldn't tell them apart. It's like, oh, great, pasty, pretty white boys. Sounds fantastic.
And none of them had any real dialogue outside of kind of one scene where they're having like a cathartic screaming thing because their friend died. And like there's this weird gratuitous masturbation scene, which I just felt that like for a film that we're trying to be like supposedly progressive, that's kind of a bit gross.
And
like, because it's not even funny, it's just a bit like, ugh.
Yeah. And what did you think of let's call it the aggressive wokeness of the film?
I think if they just expanded on that, because I messaged you beforehand, I was like, controversially, I don't mind the wokeness, but I was just, if it was coherent and then kind of actually developed into something, and like as their powers grew stronger, maybe they were able to do like more significant things than like change what a hoodie looks like, I could have gone with that. But yeah, it's so bad. And David Duchovny is someone that I do genuinely think is a talented actor. So I don't know how you felt about it, but I thought he was absolutely terrible in this. And some of the CGI used around him was, again, just like toe-curlingly embarrassing.
Oh, I thought he was just like asleep.
Yeah.
I think he was like barely there.
Yeah, like maybe there's a gambling debt that he needed to pay off or something. And he's like, cool, give me like $50,000, I'll do this.
And there was kind of going back to the CGI and kind of the effects and stuff. What do you think of the way that the film repurposes some of the shots and the imagery from the original The Craft, from the title credits to some of the kind of the witchcrafty scenes?
Oh, I don't know. Just for the most part, it just made me really want to be watching the original Craft. Ugh.
Fair enough.
It's driven me to drink, Anna. I was supposed to make it till November the 1st.
Okay, before I ask another proper serious question, just let it go. Tell me all the things you really hate about this film.
Oh, God. What was the worst thing about this film? I think the end is up there. Oh, you know what was also really fucking terrible is that in the trailer they have a scene where somebody brings out Nancy's photograph, and then that never happens in the film. So the entire way through, I'm like, did they trick me that Fairuza Balk is in this? All of the red herrings drove me insane. Like they keep making a thing about like her necklace. They make a thing about like Timmy's dead mother. Like all of this is going to build up to something, and none of it does.
Nope.
Like, oh God. It's an infuriating film because the ingredients are there, you know.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, obviously making a health film is hard, but this just feels like lazy. This feels like there was about as much thought put into it as like making an episode of Charmed.
I arguably as a long life Charmed fan, I think there's probably more thought put into Charmed. It feels just lazy. Not lazy, unimaginative. It feels just like profoundly mediocre. Someone who just isn't really necessarily a director. Like visually, I thought there's barely anything interesting. And like you mentioned, kind of some of the choices are kind of just misleading, but in a way that I don't at all think is deliberate. It's more incompetent than anything else.
Yeah. And if you're going to kind of do these like similar beats of, you know, like when they're raising them, you know, light as a feather, stiff and bored by her fingers, why does that then descend into yet again everybody throwing their head backs and laughing? Because if you watch that original scene, like they're terrified. Yeah. There's a million thoughts going through their heads. They're freaked out by this. They're kind of overwhelmed by their own power. And then if you think about how great the final confrontation is in the film, and like how incredibly like dark and twisted that fight is, and like this, we just had, I mean, they did set someone on fire, but like so badly. I mean, I think the word for it is incredibly uncinematic film. It did feel like cheap TV.
It did. It really did. I think it did not smartly use its budget, really, because there's ways of making a very effective horror film on low budgets. Like literally half of the genre is built on that. But I don't think this is it. And I did find that like in my most forgiving of stances of this film, I do think it's potentially interesting their relationship to their magic is vastly different in that they're sort of amazed and really embracing and kind of more like, oh my God, this is so cool, rather than holy shit, we're dealing with like some supernatural forces here and we might just get murdered or some like really, really bad shit might happen. And
you as an intelligent human woman, if you got powers overnight, would you just be one note about it?
No.
Exactly.
I'm terrified. But I don't know what teenagers in 2020 think like.
That's true.
So that's kind of, you know, my forgiveness of this film only stems from the thought that I don't think this is a film made for you or me. I don't think this is for our generation at all.
Mm-hmm. The thing is, I like young people and I want them to have good films.
Do you think this film at all will resonate with Gen Z audiences in the way that The Craft resonated with us?
No, not at all. I think it's kind of, and that's the reason that Blumhouse has buried it in the way that they have. Which is a shame because, yeah, this is like 4 young actresses that I think were doing their best with what they were given and like had this amazing opportunity to like, you know, for the most part, the cast of The Craft have all done pretty well for themselves. I know Rachel True might not be as mainstream known as everyone else, but she's had a very solid career on like black sitcoms in America. And obviously Neve Campbell and Robin Tunney and Fairuza Balk have all like, you know, done a lot of things of note. So it's like, I'm annoyed on their behalf that these like young actresses were probably so excited to be in this film. And this is what their kind of introduction to the world is. Because I didn't know any of them before I'd seen it.
I'd seen Lovie Simone in a film before, and I think she's probably the most charismatic actress for me in this.
Yeah.
Well, her and Gideon Adlin, I think, as Frankie, who's kind of the more rambunctious of them.
Yeah, she's fun.
But again, I don't
But again, they give her one note that she's kind of like slightly sexually attracted to this one boy, and it's like there is nothing else.
Yeah.
I mean, can you think of another?
Oh, none of them get anything. I mean, even
No.
Lourdes, who's the trans girl, she just gets one. She's got like literally like 2 or 3 lines in the film, and then I kept like looking at her, and she's always in the background. She's always in shot, but she's never actually speaking or doing anything. So I'm a bit like, why
Yeah.
do the whole song and dance and have a I all up for kind of just, oh, she's a trans character, do one throwaway line and just embrace her for who she is and what she contributes to this dynamic, but then she's not allowed to say anything.
Yeah, I mean, which is funny because I think a lot of the positive reviews I've read of this, of which, you know, there are some from some people I respect, there has been this thing about like, isn't this amazing that we have a trans character, a Latina trans character, and that like that doesn't define her. And I was just like, well, what film were you watching? What the hell else did she get to do?
Yeah, no, she didn't really get much. None of them did, really.
And then we have to talk about the ending.
I was just about to go there. Let's talk about the ending. Well, let's talk about the 2 endings, because again, there's the ending with David Duchovny, and then there's the ending with the big reveal of the film.
The big reveal. That,
so let's
which
talk
is
about...
a little bit signposted, but to be honest, I
Yeah.
kind of thought it would be Robin Tunney.
Oh no, I totally saw it coming as Nancy.
Okay, so Nancy is her biological mother.
Yep.
And we go to see her in the asylum at the end, where she looks very, very sad.
Yep.
Now, the reason that I didn't get that is because Nancy was in an asylum at the end of The Craft, and she's clearly still in an asylum. So what has happened that she had a kid? Whilst with Robin Tunney, I thought like, oh, maybe something's happened there where, I don't know, there was some terrible vengeance that gets, you know, she's, as we understand it, has been out in the world living her life. So if we're trying to suggest that like Nancy, whilst insane in an asylum, has been sexually assaulted and a child was born out of that, I think that that kind of needed to have a few minutes on it.
Yeah, that's how I fill the gap, because
especially for a film that goes on about consent.
I mean, it goes on about consent, but it's just kind of not really exploring it at all. It's just parroting the lines that you get in think pieces about consent. But on the Nancy front, like it made sense, because I think it was also very signposted by that terrible sort of fake Polaroid that was just a still photograph from The Craft in the trailer.
Which is when she's about to murder Skeet Ulrich, where there were definitely nobody taking photos in that room.
Oh, it's so cringe. I was like, oh no, what are you doing? This is not even funny bad. This is just really, really painful. But also not really sure why they would put that in the trailer when everybody would get annoyed about it and turn it into a hilarious online meme, but then eliminate it from the film. I mean, I'm glad they did, because it makes no sense, but I'm also just sort of now suspicious about the process. But yeah, I think
it's weird that they would have a thing of like, let me remind you of a much better version of this.
But yeah, I do. I could sort of see it coming, but I agree with you. There then is a number of blanks that are just not explained, not filled in, and
yeah,
you know,
I would have been all for David Duchovny being her dad and Nancy being her, you know, and her mother, and there was like and that all comes out, and it's like, you know, then she has to go on this journey because of like, she discovers she's got this really, really dark parentage, and maybe she taps into that side of something.
Yep.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Were you annoyed when you saw Fairuza Balk, or like?
I wasn't annoyed because I could see it coming, and I was like, oh, it's gonna be Fairuza, and I was like, oh, I always love her, so it'll be nice to see. It was like, oh, it'll be nice to see her.
Yeah.
But at that point, I was like, okay, I like the relationship between the two films. I think that's again, cute way to tie them together.
Yeah.
If it had more meat on the bones, it would have worked. just better, because then you get kind of this interesting question of how does Lilith deal with her parentage, what happened to Nancy, how does Nancy deal with kind of knowing that her daughter is out there, the powers are now apparently hereditary, like all of these things are questions. I was like, yes, I want an extended Craft universe, I want to know more about this, I want to spend more time with all of these different threats that are opened up. But
maybe it should have been a TV show.
Maybe, but this is not it.
'Cause at least they could have I don't know, they could have explored some of this stuff, because I don't feel like the central conceit of this is bad. Like that we're doing it for a new generation. We're bringing in like wokeness. We're bringing in kind of toxic masculinity as like the real enemy.
Yeah, but I think that I don't think it's smart enough to explore the themes that it wants to explore. I don't think it's smart enough to explore themes of female friendship outside of the superficial kind of nonsensical giggling and makeovers and sleepovers. I don't think it's smart enough to explore toxic masculinity outside of just, oh, they're all warlocks and they hate women in a really obvious way.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, yeah, but the whole point is that it's a little bit more nuanced and quite a bit more difficult than that. And it's not just about, saying that you like Princess Nokia at a party, and that's not enough to suddenly be woke. Like, it's kind of using that as almost as a laughing point. And if it was kind of intentionally satirical, I'd be like, this is funny. This is funny, but then there's nothing else to it. So I'm like, oh, you're not trying to be funny. You think you're making a good point here.
Yeah. But I think it's really like summed up in this that scene where they slow-mo walk through the cafeteria and all of the other people are like gasping and staring at them. But like you're like, but what? You haven't actually made anything here to provoke this reaction. You can't just kind of insert these things like this and not have any like context or exploration or style or motive, and like have us just completely get on board with this. I think it was genuinely like incompetent filmmaking.
Yep.
Like even the fact that David Duchovny has like 6 different motives, none of which really add up.
So let's round up this conversation by talking about David Duchovny.
Maybe this should be a TV show. Each week, me getting like comparatively drunker each week, us going over what went wrong with The Craft.
I mean, I have pages and pages of notes, and I'm kind of sad to revisit them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm. What did you think of the big bad of the film, Mr. Duchovny?
He was just crap, and also like it wasn't even like a decent twist, because this film is so devoid of conflict that there wasn't actually any other option. Like it had to be him. Yeah.
Yeah. I kind of just sure.
But his death scene, I mean, like this is what I talk about with like the tonal inconsistencies with this film. Like we're gonna have like quite a like explicit thing of like some guy jacking off, but like his death scene seemed like it was edited so it could be in like a Disney film. Like genuinely, like there is the death of the bad guy in Tarzan is darker than this death scene where he just almost like there's fire and then he like evaporates and everyone's fine with it. Nobody's traumatized at having like incinerated their stepdad, and none of it. Oh God. And even like the mother straight afterwards, like her daughter killed her boyfriend and she's fine with it. She is just as peppy as she ever was. There's no revisiting those 3 weird boys whose dad has just died.
Oh yeah. They're just, oh yeah, we're cool now. Moving away. Gonna go see your birth mother. Let alone, totally ignoring the kind of the sacred promise that I made to Nancy Downs about never revealing her parentage to Lily. Fuck that.
I know. And then also kind of philosophically, it doesn't even add up with the first film, because there was never anything in the first film that like this was genetic. And like now to come across with like, oh no, it's because your mother has this, and also there's a necklace which
Again
doesn't come to anything
at all. But that said, you know, I'm into the teasing of that idea, but then we get nothing from it. It's just like it was written on a napkin. It's like, wouldn't it be cool if there was something about a necklace and, you know, maybe it was passed down by Nancy. Yeah, that would be cool, but it doesn't happen.
I know. And also Nancy famously wore a ton of necklaces, and that was not any of them. She had some great dog collars, some crucifixes, some long stuff. Nancy wouldn't have been caught dead in a kind of simple pendant.
I haven't triple checked this, but pretty sure that necklace is from ASOS.
Really?
Just saying, because I do shop for a lot of silver necklaces on ASOS.
I have checked the original craft, and she was not wearing that necklace.
Oh, I know she wasn't.
Which is so lazy, because there were like 14 necklaces they could have chosen from.
I mean, thank you so much for your time. You've successfully drawn me into the dark side. I went from being open-minded and empathetic. It's like, oh, this is for the young ones, to now like, fuck this film.
I know what you mean, but then like, I love this younger generation. I find them amazing. You see them like doing this like cool stuff on TikTok and being so like politically engaged and stuff. And when, you know, I've got a sister who's 19, and like when I meet her friends, I just think that they're all like genuinely extraordinary and so much better than I was at that age. So I want them to have better films.
Yes. Go watch The Craft from the 90s. That's what they should do.
I'm going to watch it again. It was so good. But like, okay, like just one of the most iconic moments from The Craft is when they go out and they kind of, their powers are amping up now, and they go and they call the Four Corners, and then they come across this beach covered in sharks, that kind of, which is an offering for Mano. And there's a whole kind of philosophy of witchcraft relating to Mano, and like cool imagery that's put out there. And like, why wouldn't you, if you were making a sequel or a version of it, being just like, we need to have a great big cinematic set piece halfway through to match what happens in the original? Because there's just nothing in that, there's nothing equivalent.
No, you're absolutely right. And on that note, I think we should wrap up our conversation about The Craft Legacy.
I'm going to pitch this as a TV show, though. It can't, I mean, look, if The Craft Legacy can get made, we can.
I mean, seriously, I am down for an extended Craft cinematic universe. I want to reunite all the leads. I want everyone.
Yeah, and I want Zoe Lister-Jones to go back to doing sitcoms. Or comedies. Like, Band-Aid was good, and it was a comedy.
Yeah, they just... There's just really, the thing that I always get extremely annoyed about is that there's so many obviously it makes sense for a female filmmaker to direct this. There's so many great filmmakers out there who love horror, who have made great horror shorts, who know and are just hungry for an opportunity. I've got a whole list. I can happily send the list to anyone who wants it. There's so many great people out there who can make a horror film with bite and that taps into new woke, or whatever you want to call them, politics, and can reimagine but also honor one of the most iconic films.
So funny that ironically a film that's supposed to be extremely woke is kind of bought into white privilege. Oh my god, one last thing I have to say. What the fuck was up with the references in this film? Why would they be that into Twilight? They would have been like 5 when it came out.
I don't none of it makes sense. I don't know. I mean, it would have made so much more sense if they were just like on Witch Talk or something. What is up with Twilight? What's up with Twilight? I mean, sure, Princess Nokia is great, but also, what?
Or even like the whole thing about like, I love Beyonce because I'm a black woman. And I was just like, well, you know, she's young. That wouldn't be the immediate. I mean, we all love Beyonce, but Beyonce is like, from whether you're like 16 to 60, like that's not really a defining thing that you're obsessed with, I'd imagine, if you were a teenager in 2020.
But then again, it just taps into the fact that none of them actually have that much of a personality. And I guess pop culture references are the norm now.
But like the laziness that you wouldn't even bother to come up with pop culture references that would be relevant to them. I mean, I think Zoe Lister-Jones is in her late 30s, so it makes sense that that is what she'd be thinking of. But like that you wouldn't actually bother to, I don't know, just like put in like a TikTok star or something, like, you know, something.
Yeah, it's also just extremely mainstream. And again, kind of, I mean, it's not saying that kind of they needed to make this film gothy, but there is a style to it. There is a kind of there's a whole aesthetic background and aesthetic baggage associated with witchcraft, with kind of teen outsiders, and especially now, kind of like there's so many more visual opportunities for them to explore kind of teen Gen Z culture, even just visually, without even including it in the script. And it just looks like an ASOS magazine photo shoot.
It really does. Although I really like that look that she had at the party with all the pearls. Aside from that, though.
Oh no, I mean, like, they all look great.
Yeah, they do look great.
But I'm a bit like, why? I mean, you look really cool. Like, who would pick on you? Like, you look amazing. You look trendier than the supposed mean popular girls in your high school.
Who aren't even good at insulting people.
Yeah, I mean, they're so bad. Again, I'm sorry, I'm projecting, I guess, a lot of things. Oh, you got me so riled up now, Layla. I'm like, I might be projecting a bit, but I don't think anyone involved in this who wrote this film has ever been bullied or insulted. Because I'm like, girl, is that the worst that anyone's ever said to you?
Yeah.
Really?
They did not go for the jugular at all. Like I was saying, I think it was like literally the level of like bants.
Yeah.
And also the fact that like the only like terrible alienating thing that happens to her is this like thing with the period where she, I mean, like she's like hemorrhaging out of her vagina. Yeah. But like the other girls in the coven did that to her. The worst thing that happens to her is from this like really just like happy sisterhood, and she never seems like that pissed off about it.
Yeah. And also just like yes, totally mortifying for a teenage girl, absolutely. Like, really though, is that gonna be enough to is that big a thing?
And they have a thing, they come into the bathroom to comfort her, and they're just like, oh, you know, Timmy, he's made all of us cry. And I was like, no, that was you!
Oh my God.
Which kind of could have been quite a cool twist if they turned out they'd been gaslighting her the entire time. I'd be into that.
Also, just a final thing. All the boys look the same.
All the boys look exactly the same.
What's up with that?
And they all have like very similar bland names.
There's no interesting like everyone in that school is a supermodel. Everyone in that high school.
And last time we had Breckin Meyer, we had Skeet Ulrich, and then a third guy who were all very different haircuts, different heights. It was easy to follow what was going on.
I could only tell the three brothers apart because like one of them is obviously much younger. Yeah, one of them's a child, and the other two I'm like, which one is which? Because when woke Timmy was like, I hooked up with this guy, I was like, which one's that? Is that your friend or the other one?
No, it was another one, but there was no reason at all for that to be two characters. No. At all.
So it's just like such a weird, overly kind of testosterone heavy house, like these three sons. And David Duchovny, and he brings in his girlfriend and her daughter. I was like, oh God, this is a bit intense, isn't it?
Yeah, I really didn't believe in David Duchovny and Michelle Monaghan's relationship at all.
No.
Like they didn't seem to have anything in common, because she's like a cool mom, and she's like, you know, calling people dick bags with her daughter and like being super supportive, and he's like incredibly like stiff, weird Jordan Peterson. But like there was never any idea of like, why would those two people like each other? And it's not even like she's desperate. They're like, oh, she's a therapist from New Jersey, so she's doing fine.
Yeah. And
she seems perfectly like happy. That would have been so much better actually if they'd had like a kind of really dark thing of like a desperate woman like who's just kind of looking past everything in order to you know, have a better life for herself. Which is actually yeah, that would have been good.
You know what?
Why did Michelle Monaghan even sign up for this, though? She's a talented actress. Like, this is such a thankless role.
So why did David Duchovny sign up for this? Okay, I think we've I think we've savaged this film enough.
I know. I think we feel like we've had therapy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm almost keen to suggest doing a public drunk watch along of both The Craft and The Craft Legacy. But do we want to subject ourselves to watching The Craft Legacy again?
You know what? I've been on this podcast a few times before, and we've done kind of a load of different films. We've done, things as good as Trouble Every Day, and we've done like Species. And every film that I've ever done, I have never come away from it and be like, guys, don't watch this until now. Like, it's not even fun bad, and I love a bad film.
Yeah.
Like, I love a, like, campy, ridiculous. I love, like, Death Becomes Her. And, like, anything that's just, like, I will forgive structurally shit and terribly acted if it's fun. And I don't think that this was even fun. I think it was genuinely, like, quite depressing.
And on that note...
But, I actually liked it a lot more before we started talking. I think, like, this process was really, like...
We've dragged each other down into a level of disdain for this film that I'm almost ashamed of. Almost. So, Layla, thank you so much. And I am so sorry that you had to go through that.
Yeah, we're good people. Why did this happen to us?
So, aside from your many savage thoughts on The Craft Legacy, where can people find more of your work online?
Often popping up on Sight and Sound and Little White Lies at the moment. The new issue of Little White Lies is out in a few days, and I'm not allowed to say what it's about, but it is such a phenomenal issue. And if you're a horror fan, there's a piece about this Phantom of the Opera remake that was set in the MGM studios that I think is like one of my favorite things. I didn't write it, but it's one of my favorite things I read this year. And then loads of me as well. And then aside from that, November 7th, BBC Two on at like 9:30 p.m. I'll be introducing the new BBC lineup for films, so you can catch me there. It'll be on iPlayer afterwards.
Lovely. Thank you so much for enduring this film and for talking to me about it.
Thank you for helping me get through it.